All right, so continuing on now with Rudolf Steiner's magnum opus, The Outline of Esoteric Science. One thing I want to draw your attention to is that when you look at the table of contents, and there's 7, of course, chapters, it's evident that he has been taking previous books and miniaturizing them and folding them into this book. Chapter 2, The Makeup of the Human Being, is really a miniaturization of a book he wrote called Theosophy, which was written right before this. I think it was in Theosophy was in 1904 or 5, something like that. Um, Cosmic Evolution in the Human Being is, of course, Cosmic Memory, which he's folded inside here. Chapter 4, Knowledge, or 5, Knowledge of Higher Worlds, is a folding in of how to know higher worlds, and so forth. So he's sort of taking previous books and folding them into this book and making it his ultimate summa, his ultimate statement. Now, last time we looked at the makeup of the human being, and we saw that there are 4 components primarily, if we use the fourfold model, to the subtle body: the physical body, which we share with the mineral world; the etheric body that organizes it, which we share with plants. Plants are locked in an eternal sleep. They don't have waking consciousness. For waking consciousness, you have to have an astral body, which we share with animals. The astral body lights up the etheric body and gives it conscious awareness of an outer world. But animals can't think about the outer world the way humans can. They can't ruminate. They can't brood. They can't cogitate. They can't solve mathematical equations. All that has to do with a 4th component, which Steiner calls the I, or the ego. I wish he had come up with a better word for it, because he does not mean what Jung and Freud mean by the ego, the principle of I think, or ego inflation, or this appeals to my ego. He's not talking about that. He's talking about the transcendental subject, the subjectivity that is the meanness of me. And that is what transmigrates from lifetime to lifetime. The ego, as Jung and Freud understood it, would be a totally separate component, having nothing to do with it. So I wish he hadn't used the word I. Sometimes he substitutes it for the word soul, which is better. So there are these 4 aspects to the subtle body, and as we have seen, the I, the soul, can be subdivided into 3 different aspects: a sentient soul, a intellectual soul, and a consciousness soul, and end up making a 9-fold model. But either way, those 4 aspects of the subtle body need to be taken into account. Now, in this next chapter, which is chapter 3, Sleep and Death, it's a long chapter, and he has quite a bit to say about it, as he has quite a bit to say about both subjects all through his career, in quite a bit more and more detail. Here, this is really a truncated Cliff's Notes version of the ideas that he has to say about it. And first, he starts off with sleep, and he says that what happens in sleep with regard to these subtle bodies is that the astral body leaves the physical and etheric body. You can't take the etheric body away, otherwise you got a corpse. The etheric body is always present. The moment it leaves, you have a dead body. So the etheric body is always there, organizing the physical body. But at night, when we sleep and dream, the astral body plus the I lift up, and they go into the astral plane. And in the astral plane, the astral body depends as much for its sustenance on the astral plane as the physical body does on the physical plane. They require nourishment in their respective realms. That's why the astral has to withdraw on a regular basis to get refreshment from the spiritual realm. And what it does is it receives new images, new ideas, that it then imparts to the, etheric body. And when it does that, what the result is dreaming. So the astral body, when you're asleep, is not totally disconnected from the etheric body. It's funneling information down into it from the other plane, um, and that information then is received by the etheric body, and it changes. Not only the etheric body doesn't just organize the physical body, it also organizes, in many respects, the mind, the temperament, the psyche. Um, so it comes back down into the physical body, reunites, and you wake up the next day refreshed, because your astral body has had this journey over onto the other side. And so that's what sleep is. It's not the case that just because you get sleepy, um, you want to go to sleep. It isn't that at all. It's sometimes the astral body needs to leave. If you're listening to a boring lecture, let's say, you're not particularly tired, and you just nod off, that's because the astral body wants to leave. He makes this interesting point that when sometimes the etheric body can slip a bit, and that's what you experience when one of your limbs goes to sleep. You say, "Ah, my leg just went to sleep." Actually, what happened was that the etheric body slipped out from it for a bit. That's the feeling of pins and needles, that it went to sleep. The materialist explanation won't do. And Spengler does everything he can, or Steiner rather, does everything he can through this whole book to counteract these ideas that that everything can be explained by physical chemical processes. They cannot. And so there's more to sleep than that. But that's the gist of what happens when you go to sleep, and these different bodies relate to each other. Now, with respect to death, and he spends quite a bit more time here on death, what happens in death is that um, all three of those bodies lift out, the etheric body, the astral body, and the eye. They all come out of the body, leaving behind a merely physical body that returns to the mineral realm. And all three of those bodies go to the other side. And for a while, the etheric body, not for very long, just a few days, the etheric body continues its existence for a few days, and you have what's called a life review. And you see your life, only Steiner says, you see it in reverse. You start from the most recent events before you died, and you review it in reverse. And not only does that happen, but the pain and pleasure that you caused other people, you experience from their point of view. So you experience what they experienced. If you cause pain to another person during the life review, you're going to experience that pain. And it's going to become a karmic obstacle or hindrance or blockage toward your next incarnation that will have to be redressed. So then the etheric body disintegrates fairly quickly, and you're just left with, the eye is just left with its entanglement with this astral body. But then after a while, part of the astral body disintegrates, and it's that part of the astral body that is still attached to the physical world. Remember that the astral body is consciousness, conscious awareness. That part of it that still has desires disintegrates. He says there are three types of desires that the astral body has. One is the necessities for the physical body itself. Two is spiritual inclinations. And three is the desire for totally non-spiritual, hedonistic physical inclinations. Those are burned away in the process, except for the spiritual one. Those are burned away in the process of what he calls the purification period, which goes on here with the life review and the purification period, the burning away of the lower elements of the astral body. And I guess this would correspond more or less to purgatory in the Catholic tradition, burning away these desires that cannot be satisfied. And he says the I may bring with it to the other side the desires for things that it still wants but cannot have. He doesn't mention sex. Steiner never mentions sex, and it may just be because it's a Victorian, era still. He mentions good food, like the desire for good food. All that has to be burned away, but he makes a mistake here. It does not tally with my spiritual researches that the dead do not experience sexual desire. That's incorrect. They do still experience sexual desire, but not in the same way. It's not with the same intensity. It doesn't have the same urgency, and it's not desire for physical organs on the physical plane. They do have sex on the other side, as a matter of fact, even though they don't have genitals. They have friction. They rub their subtle bodies up against each other, and it creates uh, orgasms or whatever the equivalent is over there. They do still have sexual desires. So Steiner missed the boat on this, whether because he was a prude or a closet homosexual or whatever his orientation happened to be. He never talks about sex, and he omits this idea. He says that the dead can still have these desires, but they lack the organs for satisfying them. So therefore, there's nothing they can do about it. Not true. That's not true at all. So he's got that wrong. But otherwise, I think the model tallies with what I've learned. It's pretty clear and correct. And so he says then, so the lower aspect of the astral body is burned away. And there's still an upper aspect of that astral body that's bound up with the ego and remains bound up with the ego. And he says he doesn't describe the world over there visually very much, but he does say that there are these three areas that correspond to land masses, water, and atmosphere that are the equivalent transformation over on the other side. He says the sort of, quote, land masses aspect are the way the dead have of perceiving physical things from the inside. It's like a kind of X-ray vision that they have. He says, if you take a crystal down here on the physical plane and you look at it, all you see are its external properties. But the dead see its internal properties. They see the internal morphogenetic field, let's say, surrounding it. They also see, colors in opposite ways. If an object is green over here, they see it red over there, because according to Goethe's color theory, green and red are opposites. Same thing with blue and yellow, they're opposites. So they see things in an inverse way on the physical plane. This sort of corresponds to the land masses idea. The water idea, their equivalent of water, is the fact that they see living forms on the planet flowing like rivers. Living forms to them are almost like a time-lapse photography. They move much faster and they flow in streams and rivers. So that's how they experience what living things look like from their point of view. The atmospheric aspect has to do with feelings. The feelings that you have down here are experienced by the dead over there, or their feelings, as a kind of atmosphere. It's a kind of radiant atmosphere, I would add, of higher vibrational feelings, because they filter out the lower vibrational emotions: anger, fear, jealousy, envy. They don't experience those. Those get filtered out. Those are part of brain chemistry. Those are part of being in an animal body. That gets filtered out. But feelings become a kind of atmosphere, according to Steiner. And then he says there's also thoughts. Thoughts that we have, that we simply experience as thoughts, are on the other side actually living beings. They're like living entities unto themselves. So that's how they experience this. And then light is the fifth one that he mentions. Light, physical light, sunlight, starlight. Light is experienced over on the other side as pure wisdom. It's just a pure form of wisdom. So light is indeed, as it is in all the higher traditions, and as we'll see in Arthur Young when I get to the reflexive universe, it is the main thing. And plus, Steiner doesn't make this distinction, but the other side is a realm of self-luminous beings, what in Indian philosophy is called sukshma, self-luminous beings. They don't require external light to shine on them. They are themselves bioluminous and iridescent. The Hindus, we were talking about sleep before, and the Hindus made a distinction between three different types of consciousness: waking consciousness, dreaming consciousness, and deep dreamless sleep. And waking consciousness, they say, this is in the Upanishads, waking consciousness is oriented toward the past because it always has to catch up. Events have already always happened by the time waking consciousness comes along, like a detective or a sleuth, and has to figure it out. But the forms of waking consciousness are what are called stula forms. They're solid, they're concrete, they're subject to the law of causality, they change form slowly, and they are lit externally from the sun or firelight, whatever the external light source may be. Those are stula forms. Dreaming consciousness has to do with the present moment because it has to do with present potentialities that are within you now. And those forms are the sukshma forms. Just like the forms on the other side, they're self-luminous. The forms in our dreams radiate their own inner light. They don't need light on, they are light through, to borrow McLuhan's terms. And then deep dreamless sleep is the future. It's pure potential. There are no forms. There is no subject-object distinction. There's just a consciousness that's there, not aware of any subject-object distinction. This is what happens, as Steiner said, when the astral body withdraws temporarily from the etheric body. And then when it comes back into contact with it, while still on the other side, then the dreaming cycle begins again. It stimulates the etheric body to start the dreaming cycle again. Um, so that's waking and or dreaming and sleeping, and then we have the whole cycle of building a new astral body on the other side when it comes to death. So what has to happen then is that the individual I, the ego, has brought with it a number of experiences from previous lifetimes, whether it's hurt people, caused pleasure or pain, but it's especially the pain issue that needs to be addressed and redressed, that then becomes part of the rebuilding of an astral body. And the I remains conscious for a while of the rebuilding of the rest of its astral body, which now has to be rebuilt in accordance with the law of karma, because certain things now need to happen for that individual to redress those crimes, to redress those injustices. I call this the law of karmic balancing. If you murder a guy in one lifetime, he's going to murder you in the next lifetime, most likely. Maybe not always. It depends on the karmic involvements. Karma is a web. It's extremely complex. But that karma gets factored in as the spirit guides on the other side are helping you reconstruct a new astral body, and that astral body will then code for a new etheric body, and that etheric body will then code for the type of physical body that you're going to inhabit. If you're going to be a beautiful woman, let's say, that's not an accident. It's a choice that the I makes, that the astral body has to be consistent with, and the karma consistent with, that then codes for the etheric body to shape a physical body of that nature of beauty that will provide you with a different set of karmic experiences. A promiscuous woman, let's say, is going to have different karmic lessons to learn than a celibate woman, let's say, or a monogamous woman. And the body is going to need to reflect that. The body is not an accident. It's chosen while this process is going on. And the individual ego, the I, in accordance with the astral body, is shaping that etheric body and getting ready to select a new set of parents. And so Steiner refutes this idea that the, the physical-chemical hypothesis would say, well, a lot of kids inherit talents from their parents, like the Bach family, for instance, had musicians running across that family for generations. But Steiner says that's because the individuals who incarnated in those bodies found those bodies and those talents suitable to their karma. That's why they incarnated in the Bach family. It's not just a question of heredity. They look for the correct set of parents that will build the correct body for them that suits their karmic needs, and that is, of course, then shaped by the etheric body, which has been imprinted with information from the astral body that will then shape that body in the womb through the embryogenetic process. There's nothing accidental about anything in this whole karmic worldview. And so Steiner also says that we do indeed reincarnate in groups. People who we form bonds with, strong bonds, whether the bonds last or not, are people that we will then reincarnate with again and again and again. Not forever. There's an end to the process eventually, once the karma between the two people burns itself out. Although I doubt this is the case for the category of twin flames, which Steiner never mentions and maybe didn't know about. Twin flames are bonded for eternity. They have a bond that's like magnetism that just keeps going and going and going, because they've split from a single soul, and they're the only two beings that have the same core vibrational frequency in the universe as each other. No one else does, so it creates an unbreakable bond. But most of the people that you incarnate with are people that you have incarnated with, close friends, lovers, parents. They are people that you have incarnated with in previous incarnations. You've just changed roles. Your mother last lifetime may be a girlfriend this time. We shift roles around. The roles are what shift, but the souls do incarnate. They have the same karmic bonds, and we reincarnate in groups. And so that, in a nutshell, I think is pretty much the essence of this chapter. I haven't left anything out. On sleep and death, he goes into quite a bit more detail in some of his other books about the different planes, Kama Loka, and the different Bardo planes, and what happens on the different planes. The cosmology gets quite elaborate, as elaborate, I think, as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, with which Steiner agrees quite a bit, actually. And so we'll stop there. In the next chapter, we'll start looking at his cosmic evolution, his evolution of the entire cosmos from within. People get stuck on this idea that what he's talking about literal physical matter, and he's absolutely not. He's talking about how the universe evolves on the subtle plane, on the astral plane, as though you were looking at it with shamanic X-ray vision, and you could see what was going on the inside of it. So we'll look at that next time.